Thank you very much for everybody for joining us this evening. My name's Ali Brown. I am the FASD project lead for FASD Hub Scotland. We are so excited to be welcoming you to this webinar this evening with an amazing panelist of caregivers and adults who are living with FASD. We are going to start off with a little bit of a video. Some of you might have seen it today, but it's about celebrating the talents, successes and achievements of young people with FASD. Following that, we will then be moving on, and I'll give a very short presentation about FASD, literally 2 slides. It'll be very short, and then we'll move into actually speaking to the panel, asking some of the questions that you put in before when you signed up for today. And then at the end there will be the ability to have a bit of a Q&A. So you'll see in the bottom of your windows there's a chat function, so please use that during, if you'd like to talk to each other or give us some feedback on how we're doing. And there's also a Q&A section, so my colleagues from the rest of the team in the FASD Hub are in the background here tonight, so they'll be able to filter those questions and bring them through to the panel. So without much ado, and hopefully no technical difficulties, I'm just going to play a short film that we produced for today. Great, so I hope that everybody was able to hear and see that. That's good, everyone's nodding, so that was a success. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to share a couple of slides here about FASD, and if I had to give you 6 key facts to know about FASD, these would be my key facts. So hopefully if you're listening tonight and you're not really sure about what the disorder is, then this will help you. So FASD, first of all, stands for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. It is a spectrum, as it says in its title, so every individual is affected differently. It's caused only by exposure to prenatal alcohol exposure. So that is where a baby, when being developed in the womb, at every part of the pregnancy is exposed to alcohol, could result in having a diagnosis of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. It is a lifelong condition, and that means there isn't any cure. So you can't take a tablet to cure it or have an operation as you would with some other medical conditions. It is a medical condition though. It's what's called a neurodevelopmental medical condition. Alcohol, what it does is it interferes with the developing fetus, and it crosses over the placenta at every part of that pregnancy. And in fact, before that placenta is developed, so the placenta is developed in early part of the pregnancy, but before that even happens, alcohol can be affecting that growing fetus. There's a little diagram up in the top corner there, which has been produced by our colleagues over in Ayrshire and Arran at the FASD the Fetal Alcohol Advisory and Support Team, who were sitting in Ayrshire and Arran. They're not in that, anyway, it doesn't matter. But that just shows you there how at every single stage of the pregnancy, alcohol can affect that baby. So, as I said, it's affecting the individual, but in the womb, but it has a long-term effect. So it's affecting the way that the brain is developing as well as other parts of the body. So there can be conditions with eyes, ears, heart, lungs, kidneys, but most commonly this is thought as a brain condition. So it affects both the physical and the neurological development of the young baby, and then moving as the child is born and grows into a youngster, and obviously eventually into an adult. So that's why we would say that it would affect the physical, the behavioural and the emotional development of an individual. And in my little slide there, I've got some information about some of the different ways. So as I said before, it's a spectrum, so everybody won't tick all of these boxes or demonstrate all of these symptoms, but that gives you an idea. And the image at the bottom there, the developmental age, it's really important to remember that what you'll see as somebody with FASD is developing and going through childhood and into teen years, you'll start to see a real disparity between them and their peers, and they won't necessarily be able to keep up in the same way. And this little image here depicts somebody at the age of 18, that's their chronological age, and really interestingly, they would have ability to be able to speak. So their expressive language would be maybe 2 years older than their chronological age, but their understanding of it would actually be around an age 6, 7. So if talking in Scotland, that would be like P1, P2 age child. So you can imagine at 18, we're expecting them to move out, live independently, manage their own money, manage time, food, etc. And that can be a real challenge from people. And maybe we'll hear this evening from some of the adults with us tonight on the panel who are living with FASD, exactly how that feels for them. So an individual who's affected by prenatal alcohol, so you might see that written around, that's PAE, or with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, may be diagnosed with some additional conditions as well. It often co-occurs with other things, but they will probably need support at home, in school, in work, and throughout the rest of their lives. But what we do know, and the good news, is that although it is not curable, and although it is the most common neurodevelopmental condition in the world, with the right supports, the right early interventions, and individuals can thrive. So if they've got all of those things in place, they can have a really positive future. Again, we've got some great examples here this evening. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen right now, and I'm going to ask some of my wonderful panel here just to share with us some of their experiences. So quite a lot of people have asked about diagnosis in your questions that you put forward to us. You've asked about supports, in particular education, which I'm sure is not going to surprise any of my panel, and some practical ideas and tips. So they're the kind of things that we're going to try and cover this evening. So I wondered if, first of all, we could start thinking about some of the benefits of a diagnosis. And I don't know whether, Elsa, maybe you'd like to kick off with that.
Yeah, so benefits of a diagnosis. Most importantly for education is that you have a recognised disability, or your child has a recognised disability, which mainstream education or special education, if they're not, they have to meet that need. And if that child presents with behavioural problems but there is no diagnosis, then your school and your teachers, and I say this as a teacher, they will respond with a behavioural approach rather than a neurological approach. They won't support the brain, they will simply expect that child to learn from consequences. And you will also get, there's a lot of parent blaming. So the diagnosis is a way of saying this is a disability. You are required by law to support this disability. The Equalities Act says you need to support this disability. The UN Convention on Rights of the Child says you need to support this disability. So you have an inclusive education system, and it opens pathways to support. It changes, there's a paradigm shift, it changes the way people think about that child, and the prism that they view the child through is completely different. So that then transfers to the child having a much more positive view of themselves, and they're supported rather than punished. So diagnosis is absolutely key.
Absolutely.
Can I add to that, please, Ali?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do, Cindy.
I've been doing FASD training today online, so this is actually my 4th webinar. And one of the videos I showed during my training is a video which is available on YouTube or the NoFast website of a gentleman called Lee Harvey Heath. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
And I'm sure many of you have seen that video. And Lee does not get his diagnosis till 26.
Yeah.
And as I pointed out to the people who are watching my webinars, it can be so disheartening for young people with FASD when they don't know what's going on with their brains. And it can lead them, unfortunately, to some undesirable behaviours to try and deal with the anxiety and depression caused by that. And, you know, Lee himself talks about, yeah, it sounds depressing about things like, you know, ending up in prison and being addicted to alcohol. But when he got his diagnosis, things turned around. He knew what was happening in his brain, and he knew he needed to get support for that, which he managed to do. And he's now doing talks on FASD. He set up FASD Support Devon and Cornwall. He's a single parent. So it just goes to show how important that diagnosis is. And also on YouTube, you can find another video of a gentleman in the US who didn't get his diagnosis till 56. And yet it made a huge difference to him, knowing what was going on in his brain.
Absolutely, totally. And Lee is totally amazing. We were really fortunate to have him join us for FASD conference back in May 2018 in Edinburgh. And I know that there's some of the panel here and some of my team as well were present that day. And yeah, he just blew the room away. I think he became lots of people's new superhero. I was just wondering if I could maybe ask Paula and Demi for their kind of take on a diagnosis and what difference it's made to yourselves.
So for me, I didn't get diagnosed to the age of 16. So for me, it was a big deal to me because all my life I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was always behind in class. I would never catch up with them, and I always thought I was stupid. But then when I got my diagnosis, I realised there's actually something wrong with me. It's not just me. So it was a really big deal for me to get my diagnosis because I think it kind of made me realise that I've got something wrong with me now. I can get help for support, and I can still go on and do things I want to do. So that's my kind of...
And it's totally taken you into career, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely. What my business is basically based on my experience, my mum's experience, and my wee brother's. So it's really made me into who I am, basically, and into my job.
And what a fantastic example of being able to use something that could sound like really you know, difficult and put you in a difficult path in life, and actually you're completely changing it and using it for the good. And it's really, really well done. Demi, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add about how having a diagnosis made a difference for yourself. I know you are a lot younger.
Can you hear me okay?
We can,
yeah.
Good. It definitely helped me out. I got my diagnosis when I was about 2.5, but I didn't actually, like, I was aware of it growing up, but I didn't think much of it. And then growing up, I also knew I was behind and struggling. It was more behavioural issues at home that needed to be addressed. And then only about 6 months ago did I actually find out the real name for it, FASD, even though I've been diagnosed with FAS. And then that just opened up so many doors to resources and guys like you. So it's been a great help for finding organisations and like coping mechanisms and everything.
Well done, brilliant, thank you. And it's so great to have you here this evening, and what a brilliant step you're taking, just, you know, as you described it yourself, sort of that 6 months ago of starting to understand your own condition. And we've got a brilliant video to show you later on, everybody, that Demi has made, so please stay to the end because that's where you'll get to see that. But it's really quite fantastic what she's done. So thanks. I don't know if Alison, yeah, were you going to say something, Annie?
I think with the diagnosis, it's so important, because then these children get the right help and support that they need. I know Cindy and I were talking earlier, and we've made steps to meet Juvenile Justice Department here, because, like, you know, we do feel that a lot of children and young adults in the juvenile system may possibly be FASD children who are just labelled as behavioural, naughty, unruly children, and it needs to be looked into so that they get the right help and support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we were to look at Canada's, you know, sort of similar population that might be presenting and affected by FASD as certainly Scotland anyway, and the whole of the UK, then yes, you're right. I think it's somewhere around 32% of those that are then in the criminal justice system are thought to actually have FASD, but that doesn't mean that they're all diagnosed. So absolutely think it's crucial that this is known about within all areas of society. And you know, those of us here who are adoptive parents, you know, would want that as well for our children going forward. So somebody has asked around what features would appear prior to a diagnosis, and I think this is really interesting because, as we've said, it's a spectrum. So I don't know whether maybe Rachel, would you like to kind of talk about the things that perhaps you saw that indicated, oh, this is you know, something going on here with my child?
Yeah, sure. Well, Amy came home to us when she was 21 months old. So she came to us and she looked a little different to a lot of other children that we saw, but obviously wanting a child and then seeing this beautiful baby, like, oh, she's mine, she's gorgeous. And there was developmental delays from the get-go, really. So she wouldn't go on a tummy, she would bum shuffle, she couldn't crawl. Looking back, there were so many indicators that I know about now, and I just think, oh, if only I knew. Delayed in speech, problems with her ears, problems with the hearing. I went to every ologist and ology department going in the whole of the Rhondda where I live, and it was the delay really, and her ability to walk and run and just socializing, very, very difficult to maintain friendships, and she was very sensitive to noise, and it was a slow build up really. So first of all you think, is it my parenting? Oh, it's attachment, I'm doing a really rubbish job. And teachers going, oh, well, you know, she is adopted, and you feel like, well, is she really? Oh, I didn't know that. You know, thanks for telling me, because they like to blame the parents, but your instinct, I mean, will tell you that things are different, and you haven't gone through that whole adoption process and been vetted to then not know that something is different with your child. So by the time Amy was 8 and she went to juniors, she was way behind her peers, physically, emotionally, just in every area really. Mathematics, she was just, school kept telling me she's got to learn those timetables, and I'm thinking, you know, she can't put her shoes on, you know, when you're asking me to try and teach her timetables, you know, and surely like emotional regulation and these things are more important, and school didn't understand. So it was a slow build up really, but by the time she was 8, I really, really at that point was solid in my thinking, and my husband as well. We were like, this really now is something that we need to address. But it was difficult because for us as well, you don't want to admit that actually I've let this go for so long. Maybe I should have sorted this out when we started seeing things, and we noticed this like 2 years ago. And people are just going, oh, she's fine, she'll grow out of it. My child is that, all kids do this, and you know, and so it was a slow build up. But yeah, you just know. I think your instincts kick in, and you realise that to be so delayed and so emotional and so socially different, that is, for me, that was the trigger. Then the trigger point to say, right, we need help. So we looked through her records, and then we realised actually there was a suspected FASD notification in her red book when she was born. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, so, and they mentioned it to us during the matching, but it was so glossed over. This is back, a long time ago now. It was so glossed over that it made us think, oh, okay, it's nothing, So it was mentioned, but not really highlighted as these could be the areas where you may need support. So for us, it was putting all the pieces of the puzzle together and thinking that is now more than your average, and we need to get it sorted.
Can I offer an alternative to what Rachel has just said? Because Rachel's story is common, but when it gets complicated is a bit like my situation and others, where your child has absolutely no physical features, no developmental delay, meeting all their milestones at an early age. And it's only as they grow older, they may at home show behavioural characteristics like anger, aggression, stuff like that. And it's only as they get older that those developmental delays actually start to creep in, start to show. But sometimes that doesn't happen till teenage years. And Dr. Mukherjee gave me a great description of that. He said basically, because FASD children invariably struggle with executive functioning difficulties, but the demands on those executive functioning difficulties might not be that great, say for example, when they're at primary school, but as soon as they hit secondary school, it all goes wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cindy. That is such a wise kind of comparison there, because I think certainly in the adoptive parent community, some of us will be faced with thinking there's something different here. We might have even had a social worker indicate that alcohol was consumed, but it's probably never written anywhere in any documentation. I know lots of parents in that situation who are kind of within our hub peer support group that, may never get a diagnosis because they cannot prove. And you do need the kind of proof of their consumption unless you've got all of the facial features. But as we all know, only 10% of those that will ever get a diagnosis have the facial features. So that's 90% do not who get a diagnosis. So there must be a larger proportion, because we're only just talking about the diagnosed people there. There must be a larger proportion of people who, you can't tell just by looking at them.
Yeah, and I'll sorry to interrupt. I agree with that, because when I run my group and we have the family group, there's such a diverse range, and but all the children you would think wouldn't get along, they actually get along quite well. But just some of them are clearly have the features, and we've literally got all ends of the spectrum, and some children you wouldn't think, like you say, or most children actually, you wouldn't think to look at them that they had FASD diagnosis or on the path to that diagnosis. But I agree with the whole anger and aggression thing. That was a massive issue for us for many years, and for a huge amount of people in my group as well. They are struggling. And yes, we have had some NVR training, and it does help to a point. But a lot of my families haven't even been offered that. But yeah, I agree, and violence is something that nobody knows how to deal with, and we'll find with our children, they don't know either, because they're not at that point, they're not in control. And that for me was also a factor when I was saying to school, well, at home it's taken her like 3 hours literally to come down from a day in school, and by the time 6 o'clock comes, we're all exhausted. Oh, she's lovely in school. Okay, thanks.
And I think it's that thing about having to hold it together, isn't it? Annie, were you going to say something? You've turned your mic off, so that was an indication to me.
I was thinking for us how important understanding the sensory world was, and that meltdowns and things like that, I wouldn't say violence, but just losing it completely. Once we got into understanding the sensory world, and got a sensory assessment, a full sensory assessment, it made so much sense, and we were able to put in strategies then which changed everything. So I think that's quite a biggie for most of our children, and I sometimes worry when I hear that people perhaps haven't had a sensory assessment, because I think it can reveal things that you just can't see with your eye, like proprioception, where you are in the space around you, the use of force. So, breaking things all the time is not, it's not an on purpose type of thing. It's a reaction to not understanding your own strength, basically. So those things are a biggie, and I think if they're not understood, then they're misinterpreted.
Problem is, Annie, and this actually happened with me. When I first heard about FASD and suspected it, for my son, I did what all of us do, went on Dr. Google, and it mentioned sensory integration issues. So when I went to the paediatrician, I actually asked for a sensory assessment, and unfortunately, it's not something they do on the NHS.
Right, that's a problem.
And carers, get turned away. And some carers would have the strength to think, well, okay, I'm going to have to look elsewhere, and have the funds to fund it privately. But unfortunately, some carers don't. And that's why the Adoption Support Fund is very important, because it can be used to cover things like sensory assessments, which I've said are very important.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I suppose it might depend where you are in the country. But when I was in London, we were on a waiting list for a full sensory assessment, so it was available. However, sometimes those waiting lists are just too long, And I mean, meanwhile, your child's unofficially excluded. Dare I say that?
Yeah.
You're getting phone calls to pick them up from school, and it's just an absolute nightmare. So, one way or another, I think addressing the sensory issues is really key.
Yeah. Can I add on there?
Go for it, yeah.
Thank you. I would totally agree with Annie. The sensory stuff is the first stuff that we saw. So our little guy came to us at 9.5 months, and sleep was, and still is, a massive issue.
Yeah.
No, we're all smiling.
Yeah. It was the sensory stuff. He would have meltdowns out of the blue, and I had no idea what was going on. I took him to a baby singing class. All the other children were clapping and joining in. He was going his miles, and now I know he's got hyperacusis. That sound was unbearable to him, but I didn't know it. Whereas he is undersensitive to touch, so this child fell over and didn't cry. He split his lip and didn't cry. He pulls his teeth out when they're wobbly, But there was all this stuff, and it's so easy when they're young. If the professionals you're working with don't understand FASD, I got therapy for our son, and the thing at the end was the blanket swing, and that was supposed to be nurturing. Every single time he lost the place, and that to the social worker was evidence of insecure attachment. It's proprioception. He didn't like movement. And actually trying to say to her, this is not him rejecting nurture, this is him not liking the sensation. Is that lack of understanding, which can be so damaging, particularly for adoptive parents who already feel scrutinised. and already are wondering if they're actually doing a good enough job. So the sensory integration, we didn't have an assessment for that, and I really think it's a lottery depending on where you are. Our sensory information partly came from him being diagnosed to audiology, and partly came from OT input from occupational therapy. So that's how we kind of figured his profile out, and the rest of it is just observing him and understanding and reading.
Can I just ask a question following on from that, Ailsa? I mean, I know it's a bit difficult when we're all on these small screens, but could we just have a quick show of hands, as you know, we're doctors? How many of us were initially told that our child's issues were attachment issues?
Me.
Well, I
and this is a problem that a lot of us the doctors face. We personally spent 8 years thinking we were dealing with attachment issues.
Yeah.
And
I think,
I was going to say, Dr. Jackson, who runs the Centre for FASD, I was talking with her last week, and she said that if there's one thing she wanted me to get across to my audience today, which was mainly social workers, was the fact that she ends up seeing so many adoptive families where everything has been viewed from an attachment issues lens. So nobody has suggested looking at the proof of alcohol or evidence of alcohol in birth history, and then possibly pursuing an FASD diagnosis.
Yeah.
And just to make a point about the Adoption Support Fund, for anybody watching, that isn't available in Wales. No. It is literally an address, lucky dip, as to who would be responsible for funding that. And you need very big boxing gloves with a very big fight for your support in most areas. Yeah. So sadly, we don't get the same funding.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, because I was going to make that point that AF isn't available anywhere actually other than England in the UK, and so we don't have it in Scotland either, and I believe that neither the Northern Ireland, and obviously not in Ireland of Ireland. So yeah, and I think the technicalities being if it was a child who had been placed out of England into one of those other countries, there could be the chance that they would be able to access it while still in that 3 years post-order, where the responsibility would remain with the placing authority.
And I think over here in Northern Ireland, there are many professionals who have no idea of FASD at all. I mean,
that's not just Northern Ireland, Ali.
But my husband took Jordan for his to a paediatrician who had not even heard of FASD, tried to label him as ADHD, autistic, the usual. We were trying to explain to her that Jordan has difficulty remembering, he can't read or write properly, and her answer was post-it notes. Get him to write post-it notes to remind him. My husband said he can't read or write. It is so frustrating.
One of the training webinars I did today was actually interviewing carers of children with FASD, and that story is so common.
Yeah.
People, including medical professionals, do not know what FASD is, or if they do, have heard of FASD, they insist it can only occur if your child has physical features, which, as Ali has already pointed out, is normally only about 10% of the children with FASD. And that's one of the hardest things, one of the things that makes it so hard sometimes for carers to get a diagnosis.
But even
maybe we could just pick up on that point about what strategies you could use. I'm just thinking that I could ask Paula and Demi as well about, from their perspective, actually, it's going to be different for everybody because it is a spectrum. So, I know for me, lots of visuals in the house work for one child, but they're less successful for the other. So I don't know, Paula, would you be able to talk about things that have worked for you?
So things that's worked for me is alarms on my phone. They've really worked, like to tell me when to brush my teeth. So alarms, I've got about 20 on my phone. So they tell me to get up, and then one will go off 5 minutes later, tell me to brush my teeth, then 10 minutes later it'll be to wash my face, then it'll be to get dressed, and then to go downstairs and get my breakfast, and the list goes on. And also, for when I used to take meltdowns a lot, I know I don't seem like I do, but I did, a hug really helped for me as well. And like reminders, a lot of reminders help as well, like wee lists on the door, like wee checklists as well. They help, and a lot of timers, visuals, like wee pictures of when to do things. So a lot of that helped. And also, see, for the facial features thing, I want to say that they also grow out of them, because I had them when I was younger, but when I was going through the process of diagnosis, I didn't have it. I didn't have any facial features, so I grew out of mine. So I had to put that in there.
Thank you, Paula. Demi, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I've come up with this great plan. It's whether I use it or not. I've made this flow chart. So there's no pictures, because for me pictures distract me, but it's just a flow chart with like text boxes, like following a sequence of events throughout the day. So I've got a morning one for my morning routine. So like get up, have breakfast, have a shower, do my teeth. And then I've got a nighttime routine. So make my dinner, then put it away, clean up, teeth, you know, all of that. And then I've got another one just for like daily checks in the house, like have I drunk enough water today, you know, or, you know, I have to keep asking myself all these questions, because I can go a whole day without drinking water, because personally I won't feel thirsty. The only reason I'll know is if I start getting a headache and feel like I'm going to pass out, and I'm like, oh, I should probably drink something.
It's funny you say that, actually, Demi, because my daughter is exactly the same. Yeah. And although she doesn't qualify for an FASD diagnosis, her birth mum didn't realise she was pregnant till 29 weeks. So obviously drank socially. And she has problems with that interoception sense, that your body talking to you and telling you you need to drink water. And she did the same today, came home and she hadn't drank all day.
Yeah, because for me personally, a list up and down, like of bullet points, is just too overwhelming for me. So just having maybe like 10 boxes, just with little arrows in between. If I didn't get it ready, I could be showing you guys what I put together, but I do that, and then I put it in a poly wallet, and just with a whiteboard marker, and just cross it off as I go, and then wipe it and do it again the next day.
For us, it's following a strict routine, and we give verbal warnings to the boys. So things like, right, okay, Jordan, 5 minutes to shower, and we do that. But if we were to say to him straight away, right, Jordan, go get a shower, oh, meltdown.
Yeah,
transition.
Yeah,
because transitional issues.
Listen, we're the opposite. If I say 5 minutes, he goes stratospheric. So he'll be like, I know. So for him now, I'm like, you know, there's a transition coming up. How do you want to deal with it? And he'll go, sometimes I'll just go and look at the clock. And sometimes I'll say, can you set a 5-minute timer on your phone? But the verbal instruction for him,
too much.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's such a great example of how it is a spectrum.
It is, yeah.
And no two people are going to be absolutely identical, and the things that work for one won't work for another. And maybe also the bit about, you know, yeah, there's delays, but our kids are still developing. So, you know, developing a sense of identity and who I am, and, you You know, I'm just seen as whingy mum right now by one of my kids.
Me.
The joys of teenage years.
Oh yes.
The lovely thing, I think, once you understand where they understand their condition, is they develop strategies, and it's brilliant listening to Paula and listening to Demi, that they know best how to deal with routine, how to deal with transitions, how to deal with daily life. And once you kind of empower them by telling them what their brain is like, then even as young as 7 with our guy, you can see them start to take ownership of that, and it's fab.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I just took all over Ali. Sorry.
No, not at all. I'm just conscious of the time, so it's 22. I'll just give everyone a time check. So it's 22:09. So we've kind of got another 15-ish minutes. Quite a few questions coming in there asking about occupational therapy and people who maybe have had like a standard occupational therapy doesn't bring out these kind of things, is what I would say. That's going to look at, you know, can you hold a pen? Can you put it on the paper? Most of our kids can do that. Some of them won't. Some of them will have, you know, core strength, core stability. So I think if you can, you want a sensory assessment around OT, and you want somebody to do a sensory diet for you. And that would be particularly helpful in school, actually. That can really help kids in school. So, you know, things like if hearing noise is an issue, then it might be that having some sound sensory headphones to be able to put on, or being able to take with them a chewy type object. You know, they can get quite discreet ones these days for slightly older children into the teen years. So it needs to be very specific to your child. Like Elsa's saying, I've got somebody who really needs that proprioception, but they need it in a very different way to Elsa's son, in that, you know, they like that spinning and all of that. And I know we've shared before, and she's been like, oh, I'm working this house. So, you know, but that's the beauty really of our kids, actually, that we can sort of celebrate those things about them that are different. So that would be my advice to anyone that's listening, thinking about OT, and I'd also say speech and language, because the thing about speech and language, it can really bring out the differences between the receptive, so what they're hearing, and the expressive, and what they're able to say. And, you know, I think, not wanting to be any way disrespectful of the two ladies we've got here tonight, but they are amazingly articulate, and that is not uncommon for young people and young adults with FASD. But sometimes that can be more difficult, certainly younger down the years as well. So
I've just managed to get my checklist up just so I can show you guys roughly what I've put together, if that'll focus. But that's my daily checks one. So I'm just literally asking myself questions.
That's impressive, Demi.
Yeah,
it's really good.
So I've got that, and then for like, here's my PM routine. I've got arrows, and I kind of follow it along. Yeah,
that's
so
really
I try and stick to it.
That's really impressive.
Isn't it?
You're obviously more organised than me.
I know, I think I could do with one of those.
Yeah. What I find really interesting about that as well is all the advice that everyone gives you is visuals, 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 visuals. But actually, Demi's right, maybe that doesn't work for our children, and maybe just when they have got the ability to read, that simple sort of flow chart method, rather than that bullet point and visuals, 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 would be better. But we are, I find, here in our local authority and in the wider area in Wales, everything is so scattered in terms of what you can and can't get, but the advice that you do get is always very similar. Do you know what I mean? So it's limited advice, but the advice is always the same. There's nobody giving that, well, you know, there's nobody thinking outside the box. So
Rachel, can I ask you a question? Do you think that is because people don't understand FASD, but they want to help, that they basically give you what is effectively autism strategies, like the visual
Definitely,
timetable?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. I mean, the autism support in this area is phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing. And if we had 1% of that support, then we would be on a winner, just 1%. But some advice is better than no advice at the same time, and that's what I tell my group is listen to all the advice and pick the bits which suit you, because only you know your child best, and you've just got to ultimately what you think would work for them and what you would like to try and work in your home. So nod and smile for the bits that don't work.
Unfortunately though, as we all know, FASD is actually 4 times more common than autism. And with the reason why we're all campaigning and doing this awareness is to get our children as much support as children with autism get.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I've got friends who've got children with an autism diagnosis, and sometimes I wonder myself, well, is that the right diagnosis? But I'm not in a position to say, unless they want to address that situation, do you want to look at that again? But you can't, can you? But I totally agree. And funnily enough, I was speaking to a paediatrician in my local area, and one of the things they want to do is follow the FASD Hub Scotland diagnosis pathway. So that we'll have something here in Wales, which is a definitive route to diagnosis, because it's nothing here at all. It is literally lucky dip dependent on your paediatrician. And one of the big stumbling blocks that they had was, is a diagnosis worth it? What will it give the child, and won't it make them think poorly of their birth mother? And I was quite shocked at that, and I thought, well, they need to own their disability, and they need to know what life is going to be like for them, and what is the cause of their differences and their difficulties, so that they can manage those effectively. Because FASD,
I was asked exactly the same question as you by the paediatrician, and I gave her exactly the same answer you just said.
Oh, good.
They need to know. Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think
there's no diagnosis, there's no problem. If there's no problem, there's no need to address the problem. There's no funding, there's no awareness.
Diagnosis. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Elsa, totally. Annie, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, in our case, we had the FAS diagnosis first, but I would say that many of our children do meet the threshold for an ASD diagnosis, and they meet the threshold for an ADHD diagnosis, and whatever, other things too. So if they meet that threshold, then they should have that diagnosis if that's going to provide some solutions.
Yeah, and we've got a secondary diagnosis of ADHD, but FASD is primary, and that needs to be identified as the trigger point, if you like, for the other ones. I think it needs to be identified as the main one, but the other ones definitely need support as well, depending on where you are on the spectrum then, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I agree. FASD is like the top tier, but the other diagnoses are still valid. They sit underneath it, and they need support in for whatever it is that they meet the threshold for.
I loved the analogy that Dr. Mukherjee gave to me. He told me that FASD is like the trunk of a tree. So basically the damage caused to the brain by the alcohol is the main part of the tree. But then that can then branch out into so many other neurological disorders.
Yeah.
So like Ali, my son also has autism and ADHD diagnoses, but the main cause is the FASD.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Can I just add, not so much the diagnosis, but for me, when it's come to strategies, I do look on the ADHD organisations as well, and I do find that those strategies help me as well, and it's very similar, the issues. So I can see how easy it can be to misdiagnose, especially if you don't have the history of the birth mother.
Yeah.
And that is a huge problem, because there is very little known within professionals about FASD. These kids are misdiagnosed as autistic or ADHD, and we have to look at the full picture. I mean, when I said we were referred to CALMS, I asked what training they had in FASD. None. What had they had any experience of dealing with children with FASD? No. So how can you help my son?
And I think that the reference there to CAMS, Children and Adult Mental Health Services, is quite a common experience for many people across all parts of the UK. I think that there has been a lot of awareness, certainly within Scotland, and there are people, you know, obviously Jen Shields is a clinical psychologist, was working within CAMS, so there definitely are people out there within the CAMS services who do know what FASD is and are able to think of appropriate support mechanisms that would help families. But it is still such a developing area of knowledge and understanding, you know, amongst parents, carers, but also within the professional social workers, teachers, you know, academics, doctors. So I guess we need to be kind to everybody in that we're all on a learning curve. It is just frustrating when you're the parent trying to get the supports and everyone else around you is maybe behind you in that journey of learning. And somebody is asking about what if school don't take notice of an FASD diagnosis.
Oh, I've had that.
Elsa, please answer, because you're the teacher amongst us.
No obligation to take notice of an FASD diagnosis. Their bahookies out the window, she said in her particular Scottish idiom, but they can't not. It's a thing. It's a disability. They have to support it.
I had a social worker today ask exactly the same question, and she was trying to support a family who was, you know, battling with school, and all I could say to her was, you know, watch webinars like this, gain the information yourself, learn as much about FASD as you can, and with that family, get all that evidence together and just shove it in their faces. Keep pushing it in their faces until they have to take notice.
Two things. Equalities Act 2010, Disability Discrimination Act. If you mention that to schools, they will change their tune.
Didn't work with my school, unfortunately.
No, mine. We ended up changing
Escalate it beyond local authority level. Escalate it to Parliament. They have to. It's a legal requirement.
Oh, it's okay. I just fought the local authority and wrote to my MP and got my son out of mainstream. And I'm so glad I did, because his best friend also has FASD, but without a diagnosis. He carried on the mainstream path, has left school at 16 with no qualifications. My son went to a specialist school and has currently now got 2 GCSEs and a BTEC with the opportunity to get more, which shows that with the right support, our children can flourish.
Absolutely.
100%.
Can I just add also that sometimes we've found it useful to bring somebody with you to the meetings at the school, especially if you connect through support groups, FASD support groups, and find parents that are further along the journey than you are perhaps. It's always really helpful to bring somebody with you when you're having those discussions, somebody that's hopefully knowledgeable about FASD and that can back you up.
Yeah.
Can I add to that, Annie? I think peer support is huge.
Yeah.
I think peer support is massive, because if all your peers understand what you're going through, and you'll find that there's, like Elsa just said, there's peers that are further down the path that can pass on knowledge back to you, and then you can pass it back to the people that are behind you.
Yeah. And also that person can take notes, and I think it's important, you know, you're going to a meeting, you're having a one-off, you know, that's your chance to say what you need to say, and you need to minute it, and you need to send those minutes in, and you need to look like you know, you're on track. And your friend can do that, they can chip in when needed, but they can also take those notes while you're concentrating on what you need to get across.
That's such good advice, Annie, and I think all of us are either involved with or run peer support groups, and many of our organisations, Elsa mentioned that she is a parent, just become a parent partner for FASD Hub Scotland, and we're delighted to have a group of experienced parents who have already been, you know, along this journey, who will be able to do exactly as you've described within our service in Scotland. So yeah, absolutely. I think being able to have somebody else there, because even for me, and I'm sure you would all say the same, when you're stood in front of that person and it is about your child, you know, there's a lot of emotions attached to that. And although you know it all, somehow it doesn't come out in the same way. Yeah, you're all laughing because you know exactly what I'm talking about. Guys, thank you so much. The time is 8:05, and I did promise that we would try and finish it for 9 o'clock. I think we've just got two very specific questions left. One is about when is best to discuss FASD with your child. And I just wondered maybe if Paula would like to answer this one. When did your mum start talking to you, and when would you say is the best time, or how?
In the beginning, definitely, because they always need to know. You don't need to explain it into big details, but see if you do it in stories, like read stories saying that this child has FASD, this is how they work in their day, and this is how their mum helps them, and this is how it helps them. It kind of helps them understand who they are, and it makes them understand themselves better, if that makes sense. So that's, I said earlier, the better. That's my opinion on it.
Thank you.
Both my boys know about FASD, but I think the fact that they're very much involved in our wee charity and the support groups, they take a great pride in it. And we sort of have said, like, you know, Tummy Mummy loved them very much. And we've always said that to them. But when they were in the tummy, she drank alcohol, and that's made their brain different. So they learn things differently, but it makes them very special. And Jordan, who's my youngest, he stood up in front of his class on Monday and he spoke openly to them about his FASD, because we've had a newspaper article done for Rockin' Red for FASD Day.
Amazing.
I was so proud because I didn't think he had it in him. But his primary teacher as well said he was very open about the way his brain's been damaged. And he, like, you know, sort of takes a pride in telling people that he learns things differently and he understands things differently. And the same with Reese as well. So my boys have known for about 2 years now. And I think it's right, Paula, the earlier you know, the better.
Yeah.
And we did it in a very simple way so that they understood. And any of their friends, we tell them as well, look, their brains are a little bit different, so they learn things differently. And everybody is so accepting of them.
Today Archie stood up in class and did the same. And their entire class this afternoon did posters, FASD posters. And I think when they learn in an age-appropriate way, get it in early doors, like Paula says, you don't have to go in there all guns blazing with 9 brain domains. But they need to know when they're young about the alcohol. They need to know that their brains are slightly different. We need to know that you're having a hard time with this because your brain's having a hard time moving on, or your brain's a bit overwhelmed, and it makes sense of how they work, and they can then become their own advocate and say, no, this place is too noisy for me, or I really need some more time to stop doing this. And when they start to be aware of that, then they are much more in control of what happens, if you know what I mean. So early doors.
Gordon has seen on a beer can, you know, the very tiny warning about don't drink, and he pointed and he went to his daddy, that's me, isn't it, Daddy? That's FASD. So, you know, and I said, for us, the charity helps. And they love doing things. And in fact, last year they were nominated and they were finalists of Super Value Superstar Awards. And it was for helping to raise money to help families like ours. And I've never been so proud in my life. Now, they didn't win their category, but to me, they're winners. The fact that my boys could get up there with that confidence and be so open about their FASD.
Yeah, that's lovely.
That is really, you know, it's just so inspiring when you see young people doing things and taking part in stuff, and you know, whether that's the school play, you know, creating an amazing picture, doing something that's, you know, really, really in the limelight. I think it's I don't think there's any parent out there that's not proud, even you know, even our parents being proud of us, and we can totally appreciate how.
Can I do a quick plug actually for an FASD child?
Yeah.
If you go on Facebook onto the Much Laughter CIC page,
Yes.
there will be a video of a young man called Rossi who is doing a Redilicious makeover of Sandy Butcher, the Chief Executive Officer of No Fasd UK. And I caught the first half hour of it, and it is hilarious. But it also shows what skill Rossi has with makeup.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cindy. That's great. I'm definitely going to go and look that up after this. So I'm just going to quickly, there's quite a few people asking about, I'm in this area, that area. I don't know where there's a support group. So a couple of kind of signposting for people. There isn't FASD support groups in every area of the country, so I guess you could do what Rachel's done. You could start your own, or Annie, or, or Ali, or Cindy. You could follow suit with any of them, or even Paula, and start your own. FASD Hub Scotland, if you're in Scotland, we would be very happy to help support people to do things in their local community. Quite a lot of us here representing different organisations are part of FASD UK Alliance, and if you search for that on the internet, you will find a whole list of different organisations from different parts of the UK who are you know, all working within their local vicinity or country. Online, there's obviously different forums, which I'm sure you will, if you went into them, you would find many of us there as carers. Obviously FASD Hub Scotland, we have our own Facebook groups, which anybody's welcome to come and join. But there's obviously FASD UK, which is a huge kind of organisation, and that has a Facebook presence as well. And there's, I think, you have
ndpae.ie. We've got lots of resources as well, which people can look up, so you can access resources there.
Yeah, and you have a Facebook group as well, don't you, Annie?
We have a Facebook group, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And Ali, I'm trying to remember, I think, do you guys have a Facebook group?
We have a Facebook page, FASD Aware NI, so we can be accessed through that. We have a website as well, which you can access through the Facebook page. I have 2 support groups, and basically we're just trying to get the awareness out there. We're very much on our own over here in Northern Ireland. I've just linked in with Adoption UK, so that's going to bring new, wonderful, exciting things for us. But like I said, we're just really trying to raise the awareness here in Northern Ireland.
Well, hopefully through tonight you can link you and Annie together, and there's a connection immediately. And you've got more chance of going out for a coffee than the rest of us anyway right now.
We can do virtual coffee.
And obviously Oshie's who are based out in Ayrshire.
Yes, so we're based in Ayrshire, but we go anywhere, anyone who needs us. So we've got a Facebook page, it's just called OG's FASD, and we've also got a website as well, and we've got support groups for parents and carers, and we've got birth parents as well, and we've got kids support groups as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And Rachel in Wales, so, and you're in the Rhondda, and there's obviously FASD Wales as well, who
yes, there's FASD Rhondda, which is myself, and then there's FASD Cymru as well, which is myself and mainly Catherine, who started all of that off. But yeah, we're trying to sort of like put together something a bit better for Wales. But I'll be honest, I'm not Welsh speaking, Catherine and her family are, so she picks more the Welsh side, but she runs, it's awful, I should have written it down, but she runs, I'm South Wales, so she's more Mid Wales, and I'm not aware of anybody North Wales.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you come to FASD Cymru or FASD Rhondda, then you're welcome to both, either or, very welcome. Because it's hard and we all need support from somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant, thank you so much. Has anybody got anything they'd like to say just before I kind of wrap up this evening? And I'm going to show a little video that's been created as well. But
Can
I just want to
say a big thank you to Cindy. She's got a fantastic t-shirt on.
Oh yeah, yeah, have. I've been wearing it all day for my training webinars. I have a training website and a Facebook page training people about FASD, trying to spread the awareness because it's just so lacking out there. And I've been wearing this t-shirt all day today to demonstrate it. So yes, I have a Facebook page and a website, Elucidate Training, Elucidate to shine a light on FASD. And unfortunately, like so many other, there's quite a few adopters who've set up training. There's a lovely lady you may have heard of called Helen Oakwater. And the reason you end up setting up your own training ventures is because it's not out there. People don't know this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also run a support group locally for people who live in the Stoke and Staffordshire area with a lady called Stacey Dorbar.
Ali, could I just point out one more question?
Yeah.
Someone had posed a question, how about FASD second generation? For example, we know that grandmother was alcoholic and we now see FASD in grandchildren. I just didn't want that question to fall off.
Thanks, Judith. So it's a really interesting one, and I think some of the jury is out on it. However, a lot of research would show that when a baby is being made, the biology is that as a woman, every single egg that we will ever produce in our lives is made while we are still in the womb. Therefore, those eggs were exposed to alcohol. I think the jury, from a kind of clinical, which obviously none of us here are doctors, but from a clinical point of view, the jury is probably out as to whether, you know, that doesn't necessarily follow through, that individual who's born from, you know, if it was me, an egg of a baby that I would create, if I had a completely alcohol-free pregnancy, would then have FASD. But they're definitely, you know, maybe they wouldn't meet all of the criteria to get an FASD diagnosis, but maybe they would still struggle in some areas. That perhaps would be my suggestion. But there definitely is a, you know, a generational element to this.
He supports that as well, because he came over here 2 years ago and somebody asked that question and he explained that a lady who drinks can give birth to a little girl. That little girl can never drink, but she has the possibility of giving birth to a child who has FASD symptoms.
So it's like a 3-generational.
Yeah, he said like a genetic.
Yeah.
A genetic thing.
Because the alcohol can actually change some of the genetic makeup.
Yes.
So you might not ever end up with that diagnosis, but definitely there could be that impact. So this is why it's such a hidden disability right in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to our panel. We will share for everybody who's got a Facebook page or an organisation, we'll be sharing those links on our Twitter feed tomorrow. So anybody that's watching and wants to kind of link into them, that's where you can find them. So I just really thank my panel for coming along this evening. It's been fantastic to have you all. But before everyone disappears, we have got a short video that we'd like to share with you. And Demi, I'm going to completely embarrass her, has made this. She's produced it all herself and she's produced the music that goes along with it. It is fantastic. This is Demi. When I can find where I need to be. Sorry, just 1 second. Talk amongst yourselves 1 moment.
Can I just say as well, thank you for hosting.
Yes,
Yes,
Because it's
thank you,
been
Ali.
nice to have an opportunity to meet everybody. You see names on Twitter and Facebook and things, but to put names to faces and for you to facilitate that, that's been awesome from my point of view, so thank you.
You're really welcome, no problem at
Ali,
all.
Ali, could I just say that not everyone accesses Twitter, so could we maybe share on our FASD Hub
Yeah,
Facebook page, or send out the organisations by email to those
Yeah.
people who subscribe? Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Demi. I'm 22 and I have FASD, also known as fetal alcohol disorder. So I was adopted at the age of about 2.5. Up until then, I was in and out of hospital. But I was lucky in the sense that
Dear, technical problems.
Do we need to turn the volume side on YouTube, possibly?
I think it might actually be my internet connection. So now I can't even get out of the screen. There we are.
Ali, can you send the link out to people so they can watch it later?
We can send the link out to people so they can watch it later. Yeah. Sorry, Demi, about that.
And Demi, could I ask permission to share this video with others?
yeah, that's fine.
I'd love to put this on my page as a brilliant example, you know, of the strengths.
Can I just add, I unfortunately didn't get a chance to actually add a few things to the video, and that was like a kind of success story. Just before lockdown, I actually moved out of my mum's house, my adopted mum's house, and moved into my own place. So not only have I done that, but I've had to do all this during lockdown, and
Wow.
I'm still here today, and I've got my own place. I've had to learn to do everything myself.
And
Yeah.
you drive, and you work. Come on, don't be shy. I'd just like to add that Kelly, I don't know if she's still there, but she just noted down that she's no questions. She just wants to say a huge thanks to everyone on the panel, especially Paula and Demi.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for being with us. We will definitely share Demi's video. It is on our YouTube channel. So we'll share the link after this so people can watch it this evening if they want to, or share it beyond tomorrow morning, whatever. Thank you again to the panel, and as Judith has said, particularly to Paula and Demi for coming and being. I think it's quite different speaking as a parent compared to speaking as somebody who has FASD. So thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody for watching and being with us. It's been great.
Great meeting you all.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Take care, everybody. Bye.